Hi, everybody. Catherine Brown here with INE. It is 2 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today, Building Skills for a Multi-Cloud Enterprise. We have a great episode for you. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this. So we are really glad that you're with us today. I want to get a couple housekeeping things out of the way. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. If you registered, you'll get a copy emailed to you tomorrow. The webinar also does have a Q&A. So if you have questions, and we hope you do, because we really want this to be a thought-provoking discussion that gives you what you're looking for. So if you have questions, be sure and drop them in the Q&A section of the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. If for some reason we can't get to your question, we'll try to reach out via email and try to get that answered for you. We also want to welcome in our Facebook audience. Brittany, our Facebook guru, has set us up on Facebook, so we're streaming there. If you have a question and you're watching on Facebook, just drop the question in the comments section, and again, we'll try to get to it. Same deal. If not, we will try to answer it via email if you leave your email information there as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Catherine Brown with INE. I'm the Public Relations Director, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'm joined by Tracy Wallace and Antoine Freeman. Say hi, guys.
Hey, how are you?
We're doing great. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Antoine.
Hi.
Just to give you a brief background on both of these guys. First of all, we're very lucky to have both of them with us. Tracy brings more than 20 years experience. And as we like to say around here, he is a treasure trove of knowledge from Microsoft, certified as an Azure Solutions Architect Expert and an Azure Administrator Associate. Tracy's skills cover multiple facets of the Microsoft field. He holds a BA in mechanical engineering from the University of Maryland, go Terps, stumbled upon his career in technology by accident, actually working as an economic consultant, realized his favorite thing to do had to do with computers, so he decided to follow his passion and stick with that. He has not looked back since. Tracy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having us, Catherine. And yeah, I do want to let you know that I did force her to say that about the treasure trove. So,
my arm is still hurting from being twisted a little bit, but it's all good. No, we're really excited. Tracy, I know you're very shy. So, I'm just kidding. Tracy's the least shy person I know. So we're going to have fun today.
That's the goal. Get some information out there, have a little bit of fun.
Awesome. All right, Antoine. Antoine has worked in sales and marketing for tech companies, including Cujo and Freeman Group, has a degree in full stack and AWS solution architect certification. Antoine, by the way, first generation US born after his family immigrated from the Ukraine in the 1970s. He's passionate about learning and growing in cloud knowledge, sharing that information with others, which is obviously a passion here at INE as well. His mission is to provide CSAs, CISOs, CTOs, and CSOs with the tools necessary to confidently secure the public cloud, and everyone benefits from that. Antoine, thank you so much for joining us today as well.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so today we are talking about the cloud. Want to get started? Let's jump right into it. Move to the cloud computing, well underway. We all know drastically accelerated by the global pandemic. And while it brings a lot of opportunities, it also brings a lot of challenges for many industries and particularly for IT professionals. Today, we're going to explore some of those challenges, and we'll talk about some plans and some strategies for ensuring that your workplace is ready for the cloud transition. And Tracy, I want to start with you, just using that as a jumping point. So what can you do to ensure that your workforce is ready to manage your critical infrastructure in the cloud?
That's a great question. And I think there's a couple things that, you need to look at. You mentioned the fact that there's been this tremendous growth within the cloud. And, that certainly has been accelerated with COVID. I was just reading some articles literally today, though, that were talking about the fact that there's expectations that the COVID blip is not just a blip. In fact, that there's going to be even more acceleration in 2021 towards the cloud. And that's fantastic because there's tremendous things that, tremendous benefit that the cloud offers. But, with this really rapid uptake with the cloud, there's absolutely a skills gap there. And the number of folks that are in organizations that are moving to the cloud that are intimidated by the cloud, that aren't sure what's in the cloud, that really does generate a skills gap. And you hear things like there's 170 different services provided by one of the cloud vendors, and that tends to get a little bit concerning as far as, okay, we're moving into this cloud. How do we go about doing that? And, I think what's really important is that you start out with this fundamental grounding of not only what the cloud is, but also what the cloud isn't, right? And how it provides it at a basic level functionality that makes it easier for your company. And I think that's one thing that really is forgotten a lot when people start talking about the cloud. The whole purpose of moving to the cloud is to really make it better for your organization, to make it so that your organization, whether it is government or whether it's private industry or even a charitable organization, whatever it is, or frankly, just you want to play around. Our chief content officer, who's been on a few of these, was showing me, a month ago, where he's like, I want to set up some security stuff, and he just set up a global security monitoring system over the weekend using the cloud, right? But in order to do that, you need to, one, know what the cloud is and what you're doing in the cloud, but also know what's available across different clouds and how you can make the choices to really, target what you need to the platform that's going to best cover that need.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you say that and drive that point home, Tracy, figuring out and really clarifying what the cloud is, but also as important, what it isn't. Antoine, do you think there's a certain degree of maybe fear among some security officers or some in the IT workspace that transferring to the cloud is just, I don't know. Do you think there's a certain degree of fear there of the unknown?
I see where you're going. I think it's a great question, because I think fear is a great motivator, but at the same time, it's a big brick wall. I think in any aspect, we all hit it, right? So I think there's some misconception in terms of, on-prem to cloud and having a firm understanding to, the policies and the securities. And, on-prem, you want, a perimeter of security, but it doesn't work the same way. It's not one-to-one. So I think that in terms of fear from the IT side, yes, because, if you have your development team and you're going into the cloud and you want to go AWS, but your handful of engineers are all Azure, that's already an issue, because you don't have somebody there as a leader to lead the way into the environment that you want to go into, right? So you have to have a good understanding. So yes, of course, the not knowing what's ahead of you in the journey, I think, is the biggest fear of anybody's projection of where you're going to be. And then it comes to the question, like, how long is it going to take us to get there? What are those steps? Well, this is where we are and this is where you want to go. And we have to build out a, business strategy and put the teams, the heads of the teams together to create that strategy and kind of go rubber meet the road, and take it one step at a time. But yeah, absolutely. Fear is definitely there.
Just for the both of you, I wonder if we could talk about some strategies for leveraging your team's existing skill sets, kind of minimize the disruption and the risk with transitioning to the cloud.
That's a great question. And I do want to get back to Antoine's comment, because I think it's really relevant. But, I think part of it, and this actually does tie into what Antoine was saying, is that, when you see a migration to a cloud, it's usually a phased migration. You're usually seeing folks say, okay, what we often call lift and shift, right? Where they're saying, okay, we have certain workloads on premises. We have these in a virtualized environment. There's a virtualized hosted environment available in the cloud. And we can take what we're doing on premises and we can shift that into the cloud, right? And really, in a lot of ways, that's a great way to start. And, there's a lot of really smart people that have decided to start that way, so it kind of makes sense. Yeah. But, what that means is a couple things. It means that, first of all, the skill sets, a lot of those skill sets that your infrastructure people have, for example, those skill sets are going to translate into the cloud. And so you're not learning a fully new way of doing something. a virtualized computer is a virtualized computer, whether you're running it on premises in VMware, or if you're running it in Hyper-V, or you're taking that exact same workload, exactly defined the same way. And, as it turns out, the cloud providers are more than happy to help you migrate what you have on premises into their environment. It's shockingly a lot easier to get it in than out. But, the thing is that, and again, to that fear factor, people think it's going to be completely different. It's not. Now, it is different, right? Because, the way that I manage a virtual machine in Azure is different than the way I manage a virtual machine in VMware, for example, or AWS, et cetera. But I think, you get over that. And again, just to harp on what Antoine said, you get over that fear factor and you say, okay, it is different. So, but there's a lot of the skills that I have that are going to translate over, and you look at that on the networking side, right? And I tell you what, if you want to not have an ego, hang out with network engineers, because like the conversations that they have, about the protocols and the hardwares and, the designs that they come up with are amazing. And one of the things I've found is that network engineers in particular make that transition into the cloud really pretty easily, because there's a lot of the same things, but there's just a lot less they have to worry about because it's all software defined networking, but you still have that need to connect up, and what I always tell people is, you kind of look at the cloud as being another data center and just a wide area network, right? But now, instead of having to do all the wiring and all the switching and all the other things that the network geniuses that always make me feel bad about what I do, but all those things that they do, they're still going to do them, but there's just a lot less that they're going to have to do in the cloud, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Antoine?
I mean, to definitely say that Tracy has his point, it's 100% accurate. I think that going back to the fear aspect, when you don't know what you're getting into, it's very difficult to feel that confidence. But as you lift and shift and you see, where the strategy comes into place, and you see where the problems come up, you start to deal with them. And every organization, what I think that the fear should come in is leaving your gaps in security as you're building these things, not the actual process of getting into it. But I think that, that mindset of we're going to be cloud first, that's not a business strategy. That's just an idea thought for what your business is going to do. And there's a huge, misconception of what your understanding of the cloud is and what your shared responsibility. And Tracy and I were definitely on the same page with that. The shared responsibility model, nobody understands it. Like, I don't want to say nobody understands it. Obviously people do, but I think that a lot of people kind of skim through it and have like, oh, I'm SaaS based, or, I am IaaS, or I am PaaS. So this is, what I'm supposed to be doing, and you're supposed to be responsible for this, but that's not always the case. There's always that SLA, read the fine print of what really is. And that's where the fear should come in, is not having understanding of where you're going.
So how often, go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, no, I was going to say one thing that I think is really important. And it was funny because I think Antoine and I bonded very quickly over the concept of shared responsibility, is that the flip side of going, oh, it's so different, I'm not going to be able to move into the cloud, is the concept of, oh, I'm moving into the cloud, so now the cloud provider is responsible for everything, and particularly, for example, when it comes to security, there's some really cool stuff out there, for example, on, the actual physical data center security that the cloud providers are going to give you. That's their business. But it's your business to really secure your workloads. It's your business to secure your data. And that doesn't change, right? It doesn't change because you're now in the cloud. It's the same rules. And I mean, I think, this is something, Antoine, I would say, what's your comment? For me, that's the biggest thing, particularly when it comes to security, where the vulnerability in the cloud is not that the cloud is inherently more vulnerable, or that the cloud is inherently less vulnerable. but it's that people will say, oh, okay, that's not my problem anymore, right? But it is.
It is. And it doesn't just stem from this level. It really stems from the guys who get their hands dirty doing the work that's trickling down from the business and from the IT plans, right? Because if you talk to an engineer who's trying to, push out code and push out, into the repository, and you say, oh, where in this process is the security aspect of it? And so that's not my responsibility. I'm just here to push, done, and then it trickles through. But again, you're absolutely right. It's just, companies leaving gaps and not following through to having a plan that without faults. Every plan is going to have its faults. It's just a matter of how you catch them, when you catch them, and what you do about them.
Sounds like I'm reminded of a phrase my twin 5-year-old daughter say all the time: teamwork makes the dream work, right?
100%.
Right.
There you go.
And here we're a community. It's not just teams. I mean, like, I'm sure Tracy can agree with me. Every company, right? Whether you're a tech company, whether you're a retail company, if you're cloud-based, we're all fighting the same battle, right? You're fighting a battle to stay secure, to stay compliant, to keep, revenue moving, business continuity. But I think there's, going back to the fear topic, and Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, most companies, when they're hit, even if they know they're hit, they don't even want to talk about it. It's like taboo with them. And honestly, I think that the way for all of us to win is for that to change and for it to be open and shared. Like, this is what happened. Like, okay, we're suckers. Like, we messed up. We let somebody in the back door. The S3 was open to the network, yada, yada. We know what the issues are and misconfigurations, but how and what you did about it as a playbook for all of us, I think that's the key for all of us to succeed.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely a valid point, and to kind of go towards, something Antoine just mentioned there, and he kind of threw out a concept there, S3 endpoints. If you're not super cloud aware, S3 is the storage area in AWS. And you may not think that you have anything to do with it, but it's highly likely that you have been given links to things that are stored in S3. And one of the issues with going to the cloud, and this is where, I'm going to kind of play both sides of the argument. On the one hand, you want to leverage what you already have, right, as you move into the cloud. But as you move into the cloud, there are some new challenges, and particularly when it comes to security, right? So, if I'm on premises and I've got, let's say, a file server, it's a vulnerability, but it's really well known. And let's say that I'm in a Windows environment, and so I've got just a Windows file server, and so I'm controlling access to that, and that's fine, right? And that's really well known. But now you're going into the cloud and you're storing things in this thing called S3. Well, how do you secure that? And it's knowable, right? But you have to know it, and that's where it is more than just lift and shift. And particularly as you start to really move along in your maturity in the cloud, right? And you start to use things like S3, let's say a Lambda function in AWS or a function app in the Azure environment or in Google Cloud Platform. Right now, what you need to start doing is truly understanding those services. You're going to get a lot of value. There's tremendous value from using cloud storage. It's a huge reason why people move to cloud storage. But just that one little aside there. Hey, I have an unsecured endpoint in S3. That's huge. But it's also something that's fixable, and it's something that is a misconfiguration or a non-configuration because maybe somebody didn't really fully understand what S3 storage is and didn't fully understand how to lock down S3 storage.
Which it's
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, which to which bring us to Tracy and I would probably understand that again. How do you fix something like that? It's understanding your frameworks and what policies you have wrapped around, your resources, and having a clear understanding as to how to implement those policies to the best of your ability, I suppose, because training is really what it comes down to, and experience is really what it comes down to. Having oversight, so it's not just an automated, which by the way I love automation, but having a blanket policy automating something to cause bigger problems than the one that you're trying to solve is also something that should be a fear for most companies.
Yeah, I wanted to get to multiple cloud vendors, and Tracy, you brought up this stat to me: 80% of current public cloud customers opting to deploy across multiple cloud vendors right now. So let's talk cash. How do you optimize your cloud training budget when that's the case?
That's a really great question, and I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to talk about something else first. And I'm going to share a couple of anecdotes. I am my upbringing in the cloud is in the Azure environment. I play around in Azure, I play around in AWS, and I play around in Google Cloud. But I spent the first 8 years of playing in the cloud really exclusively in Azure, and so that's kind of where my mindset is. And my son, who I love to death, but is completely just betrays me at every opportunity. He's no, he really doesn't. But he's a developer, and he's an AWS developer, and so we'll kind of get, not for AWS, but he builds his apps in there. And we kind of go back and forth. And this weekend, I was building what's called a Lambda function in AWS, and I was kind of frustrated because I was like, well, this would just be so easy for me just to do in Azure. And then I finally got it, and I said, well, okay, that was really kind of, well, I was wrong. It wasn't hard, but it comes back to, and I swear I'm going to get to your question in a moment. It comes back to this. And, there's that saying where if you know 2 languages, it's a lot easier to pick up a 3rd language, right? Because what you do is you stop thinking about the language itself and you start thinking about the communication, right? And the same is true for programming. If I've only ever programmed in one language, that's how I see the world. I used to teach programming, and I would see people come through this way, like, oh, this was so easy, so much easier to do in this other language. No, because that's the only way you thought about it. Right. Well, the more that I work across clouds, the more I realize that that's a dangerous approach to knowledge. And particularly now where we have, cloud is becoming a commodity. Yes, there's a dozen different cloud vendors. There's 3 of the biggest outside of China, which would be AWS and Azure and Google Cloud Platform. Right. But so much of what you see, and frankly, what I was really, I don't know, guilty is not the right word, but kind of the way I was too, is that the knowledge, the training is stovepiped, right? You learn Azure, or you learn AWS, or you learn Google Cloud Platform. And then if you need to make that switch, you have to kind of go back to the beginning and start all the way up, because you weren't thinking about cloud. You were thinking about Google Cloud Platform, or you were thinking about AWS, right? And so I think one of the things that is missing, and I'm going to throw a little plug for I&E in here, one of the things that we've really committed to at I&E is starting from the concept first, right? Because whether it is what people love to call serverless right now, which is what I was working on with Lambda, whether it's serverless or a database, or whether it is a virtual machine or EC2 in AWS, there's a lot more in common than there is different. And so what I think makes sense, and what we see as making sense, and where there's a real need, is to start your cloud training budget. So I eventually get back to the concept
you're getting back to it. I see where you're
back
going.
To it is look at saying, okay, let's focus on thinking about cloud in general, right? And you're going to need that expertise. Look, if you're hosting a workload in AWS, you need to have people who have that expertise in AWS, 100%, right? But you should start with concept first, and start with, okay, what is infrastructure as a service? It's a term that's bandied about, and going beyond just, okay, well, that means just, they're providing the basic infrastructure you build. Well, what does that mean to you as somebody who's going to actually implement a workload, right? And you get that fundamental concept first, and then it's a much smaller path up to that expertise level within any given provider, right? And to use an analogy, it's like if you think about networking, right? Maybe I'm. And by the way, I hope nobody asks me any questions about these because I can throw out the acronyms and that'd be about it. But maybe BGP, right? And you know that really well. Okay, well that's great, because then when you have to go and deploy that in a particular network vendor, you need to learn the details of the network vendor, but you already know what BGP is, right? And so I think when it comes to really preparing your team, it's that look at the fundamentals first, right? And take an approach to skilling up your team where you start with the fundamentals, and then you can then branch into that level of expertise, but it's going to give you a better foundation, and it's going to give you that ability, if you choose to move between these what should be commodity vendors at this point, it's going to be a lot easier to do that.
Yeah, it seems so common sense to learn the skill and then learn the program, but right. It certainly doesn't seem like it's the industry standard, but it absolutely makes sense, Tracy. At this point, since you got your plug in, I'm going to get my plug in. That INE is having Cloud Week next month, March 22nd through the 26th. We're doing a lot of really cool things that week. We've got boot camps and webinars and some great giveaways. And we have Cybersecurity Week coming up next week here at INE. Same deal, a lot of cool stuff. Webinars, giveaways, and a lot of time to really interact with our experts here at INE. So we are looking to do more of that as we go on here. And as you may have heard, INE recently restructured its prices as well, so offering a ton of content at a lower price point on the business and the consumer side. So definitely check that out at our website, ine.com. With that, I want to move into the audience Q&A section. We've had some great questions from our audience. And the first one, Antoine, I want to direct this one to you. How has the SolarWinds hack affected multi-cloud enterprise?
Good question. I guess the first thing I can say is, regardless of whether you're cloud-based or multi-cloud based, it's affecting you, because at the end of the day, a bad actor got through the back door. Infected malware, stole personal private data. So how does it affect the enterprise? The same way, regardless one way or the other. It's just a matter of how many resources it's taken down in the process, how big your infrastructure was that you got hit, right? Because one company's damage isn't going to be the same as another. But if you look at it in terms of percentage of it could be the same. It's just a matter of the dollar amount damage. But ultimately, cloud or multi-cloud doesn't matter. It was bad for all of us.
Yeah, and if you don't mind just kind of going on that, one of the things that was pretty interesting is that there was, I was waiting on it, as a cloud person, I was like, okay, let's see how this hits the cloud, and certainly the articles start hitting how that the cloud's getting hit by this and it's a target. Well, if you really look at those, it's exactly what Antoine was saying. It's not that it's the cloud. And it's not that it's multi-cloud. It's that there was a hack. There was a breach. And if you have resources in the cloud and you were breached, those resources are exactly as vulnerable as the resources that you had on premises, right? It goes to that shared responsibility model that we were talking about, is that you are responsible. And, one of the things that was kind of interesting was that one of the targets of the SolarWinds hack was Active Directory Federation Services, or ADFS, right? And so you can look at that and say, oh wow, ADFS got hit. Well, what actually happened was, the software was running on premises, and it it got in, and it had breached the on-prem environment, and they got the accounts they needed to then take over ADFS, which then gave them access to all of the cloud assets, and so I think it comes down to that. I think what Antoine was saying, things to be afraid of is it's more about being afraid of having a vulnerability anywhere in your environment, and that you can't, from a security standpoint, treat the cloud differently than you do on premises.
Yeah, and you mentioned, in the same vein, security. We had another question from our audience as it relates to cybersecurity. What current steps are being taken to secure the cloud? And just picking up off of your answer there, Tracy.
So, what's kind of interesting about that is that I think, and this is, just kind of keeping an eye on the cybersecurity environment. I think Antoine probably certainly can add to this, but look, there's tremendous amounts of money and resources that are going into the cloud, and that means the threats are going to follow that, but it also means that it's in the cloud vendor's best interest to have good tooling. And I know really across the major cloud players, they are building and they are improving their internal as well as the tools that they make available to users. I know, for example, I believe it's within the next month or so that there's going to be some pretty significant announcements coming out of the Microsoft side with some of the improved tooling that they have for cloud. So I think, again, it all comes back to it's not fundamentally different where your resources are. There's going to be attacks. It's just now you've got, the largest companies in the world that are providing, security and platforms to help you do it. And I know, Antoine, I'm going to throw it over to you because I know this is something that you've got a lot of experience with.
It certainly is. Geez, where to begin? So I would say that, of course, every company that you speak to, when it comes down to making a decision, are you being reactive to a situation, right? Or are you being active to the situation? And most companies will say we're reacting to something because of what that gap in time is from the time that the incident has happened to the time that it's investigated and found where it actually is. And that's mainly because, with companies going into the cloud and having so many resources up, and it ultimately creates something we like to call alert fatigue, right? You're getting so many different violations coming in-house. And I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I know we're in a short period of time, so I'm going to try to hit the big points here. Suppressing violations that actually are violations, right? Versus going through thousands of alerts that could be false negatives, and those are where your gaps in security is, because that means that the business is saying we are okay with accepting minimal amounts of risk when you really don't have to. And that boils down to, again, what is your security strategy? What tools do you have in place? What training are your teams having for these tools? Are they just there and you're not using them? I've been dumbfounded by how many companies really do have tools which were made for issues that aren't really in the dynamic sense that we see them in today. The reliability is still there. But when you say like, oh, well, our tool scans and we're giving you alerts, you come into 6 a.m. into the morning, you have 2,000 alerts. Who's going through them? You have dedicated teams who are shifting through these alerts, suppressing some of the violations that they think are low, and they really could be that foot door for a bad actor to get in. And that's typically where it's happening, is at that level, right? So where we at Secbarris we take a different approach to the overall problem. We're looking at the risk, not just our risk appetite, right, that the initial business starts out with, but where your posture is today in real time. And I think that's the biggest gap, is most organizations don't know what their baseline risk posture is, what their risk score is today. And furthermore, the steps that are being taken on a day-to-day basis, they change what your true risk score is to the minute, because your resources change, the policy doesn't. And I think that, coming back to what we were speaking about earlier about security frameworks and understanding, taking a policy and putting it around your security, sorry, lost train of thought, around you, wow, around your,
that's okay. You know what? I'm gonna bail you out on that. I tell you what, Catherine, you mind if I see there is a there's a question there about platforms you can recommend for managing workloads.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
All right.
Sorry, guys.
So here's the thing. Right now, what's interesting is, all right, so the question is, are there platforms you can recommend for managing workloads across multiple cloud providers, centrally monitoring workload costs in AWS and Azure, centrally monitoring security posture of workloads, which I think, Antoine, that kind of heads towards where you were talking about in AWS and Azure, and migrating workloads from AWS to Azure and vice versa. So that is a really layered question. And I'm gonna take some of that, but not necessarily all of it. I think in terms of monitoring, and there are, first of all, the cloud providers are going to give you their own monitoring solution, and those monitoring solutions not only are going to provide a rich monitoring environment, whether you're talking about CloudWatch for the AWS environment or just Azure Monitor, but they also have APIs that allow you to integrate application programming interfaces, that allow you to integrate them with other software. Mm-hmm. I think, maybe a year ago, I'd say, hey, SolarWinds would be a great tool for that, but maybe not quite as much now. But I think, there's kind of two extensions of that. And I bring up SolarWinds kind of jokingly because, unfortunately that was other issues going on there. But if most monitoring tools are agent-based monitoring tools. And for a lot of those monitoring tools, you're going to find that, particularly if you are new into the cloud, you're going to be able to use the same tools that you're using on premises, because you're going to use the same agents and the same VMs that are running now in the cloud rather than running on premises. So, whether you're talking about Splunk or any other of the, very common tools that you use for multi-vendor monitoring, those will work. Plus, you've got the native tools. You also have, what's interesting is the native providers are starting to build tools that are designed conceptually for multi-cloud management. For example, what I'm most familiar with is the Azure environment, and within the Azure environment, you've got Azure Arc, which came out, I guess I want to say in 2019, and I was super excited about, because it was a on-prem and cloud managing and monitoring environment, and it worked across clouds. And it did about nothing. So it was a little bit unfortunate there, but it's also something that has been invested in. And I know you've got other tools there. There's certain vendors that I think that you can look at. I know Red Hat has a lot of tools that are cross cloud available, but I'll also say, from what I've seen, other than the ones that are agent based, that it's a space that's a little bit lacking. I think, you've got certain tools, not exactly what the question was, but you've got certain tools that are, infrastructure as code tools. and DevOps tools. Those are a number of those are very well integrated. I know, one that myself and a lot of other people are very familiar with, Terraform, for example, is a great tool for being able to deploy across multiple clouds. But again, a lot of those agent-based tools do have things built in. So there's a very good chance that if you're using tools now, particularly if they're cross-vendor type tools, right, that are designed to work not just for Microsoft or not just for IBM or for whatever. I think those are going to be really good candidates. Now, in the security space, I think, Antoine, in terms of tools that they're going to work across the security space, you'd probably be a little bit better answering that question than I would.
So, absolutely, just to kind of tie through, yeah, absolutely. So every AWS, GCP, Azure, they all have their security tools to help you in terms of managing into a single pane of glass and seeing your environments to an extent. I think that the limitations become as you try to scale to a certain size. I think that if an organization can manage to do things manually without so much automation, I think you're still in a winning column. But I think once you're growing and your organization is 1,000 plus, it becomes very difficult to manage everything with teams. I think there are certain tools that you have to have in place in order to integrate with your platforms in order to be able to scale.
Excellent.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much. There's so much to talk about. A lot of really exciting things happening in cloud. Obviously, cloud is having a bit of a moment now. So we're going to continue this focus on cloud for our next webinar. As I mentioned, it's going to coincide with Cloud Week here at INE. Our next webinar is our next BizTech Blueprint webinar. It's Tuesday, March 23rd. And, in this upcoming episode, we're focusing on cloud security concerns, really, kind of jumping off from what we were talking about toward the end of our discussion here. Cloud pen testing, some best practices. We've got INE instructor Philip Wiley and former bear wrestler, by the way, and industry expert John Helmus teed up, again, all coinciding with INE's Cloud Week. So be sure to head over to our website, social media channels to get involved with that. Be on the lookout for an email you're going to get tomorrow if you registered for this webinar. Or keep an eye out for emails that we'll be sending out for registration for the next webinar. In the meantime, if you have a topic that you would like to see us discuss here on BizTech Blueprint, you can email me at kbrown@ine.com or find us on social. We're anywhere and everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all over the place. So find us and shoot me an idea. Use the hashtag BizTech Blueprint. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and great conversation today.
Hey, thank you so much, Catherine. And I just want to add to that, by the way, if there's questions you didn't put up there, feel free to reach out to us. Love answering questions. And I just want to thank you for everybody that showed up. Thank you for your time coming on. And again, Catherine, thank you so much for having us and putting this all together.
Thank you, Cap.
Awesome. Thanks, Antoine and Tracy. Everyone have a great day. Great Tuesday, I think. We're almost halfway through the week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Take it easy.
Take care. Bye-bye.